time on the episode 27, Walking Through Death, and continue talking about the archetype of Persephone. Now, if you did not catch the original broadcast, it was done on Tuesday, which was yesterday, and it was on Inanna. And so the two different stories that I'm covering this week are mythical archetypes. The first one was Inanna, who is a Mesopotamian Sumerian story where Inanna, who's known as the Queen of Heaven in that realm or mythos, is willingly going into the underworld. And so, if you want to catch that story, please feel free to go there and catch that. I am going to be talking about Persephone today. Now, Persephone is a little bit different because Persephone was captured and taken into the underworld by Hades. And so she did not willingly go into the underworld. And when we look at what the underworld personifies, it personifies going deep into darkness. And these are stories that reign with a really strong presence because we all feel that darkness in our own lives. We feel these dark archetypes kind of playing out. And I was actually just reading about the gate gene key 11, which is the city of light, and it's city SIDDHI of light. And it represents kind of going into this Garden of Eden and is, related. If you know anything about gene keys, it's a kind of a big thing on its own. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but there are some interesting parallels of what that gene key is and why it is so important. I have my book here, so I'll talk about that a little bit. So let's just get the summary of the story of Persephone. So Persephone, one sunny day, is out with her friends picking flowers in the meadow. And her mother is Demeter, who's the goddess of grain and growth, and her father is Zeus, who's the king of gods. And they watched and loved and adored her so much. And so she's picking flowers and she glimpses towards the narcissus flower. Hello. And yeah, thanks for joining me. It's kind of late today, but Gaia, welcome. Key, welcome. Or Quay. I think it's Key or Quay. But so she picked the flower, the narcissus flower, and she feels the ground begin to tremble beneath her. And so when that happens, Hades emerges from the underworld, and Hades is the brother of Zeus, and emerges in his fiery chariot. And before she could even scream for help, he takes her, he seizes her and takes her in his chariot to the underworld. And in the underworld, there's certain rules. So when I was talking about Inanna and the rules of the underworld, there is a really strong rule of if you go into the underworld, you're not able to come back. I'm reading the story of Persephone. We're going to be talking a little bit about death today. It's just kind of a bonus stream from the stream I did yesterday. So there's rules to the underworld. There's rules to going into your own inner dark chaos. There's rules to going in there and really reviewing what that is. So sometimes you might have fears that are sitting in there. And a lot of the time, in the way that I teach, in our mind, we have our right brain and our left brain. And we have this kind of centered area, which is our ego. So the right brain is a little bit more feminine. It's imagery, it's creativeness. It's kind of this chaotic darkness that sits on this hemisphere of your brain. And then on the left side, it's more of the logistical and analytical reasoning and that kind of stuff. So when I talk about going into the underworld, it's really just kind of being able to flow in between your brain hemispheres and really collaborate and connect with them. And it can be a little terrifying, and there can be a lot of fear there, especially if you sit with a lot of trauma in your system. That world is being fed into your outer world. That's what I think. I think that your inner world is showing you, your outer world is showing you your inner world. It's just like this holographic projection of what is happening in your system. So there's rules to the underworld. And so Hades tells Persephone that her father Zeus had helped him plan her kidnapping, and that she was going to become the queen of the underworld. I love Hypnos. I always find the fact that he is Fatnos' brother fascinating. They do say sleep is the little death. Yeah, that there is a lot to that, because the dreams are definitely being affected by that right hemisphere, that creative part of our brains. And a lot of the time, you know, in what I've been reading, when we look at kind of the mass consciousness, which means like what we think is reality, what we think is this world that we're all like collaborating in, it's actually this full mental representation that most of us are sitting here projecting from our left brains and not too much from our right brains. But right now we're kind of in this, since 2012, what do they call it? I'll think of the term. But since 2012, there was like this great change that happened in humanity. And so a lot more people are activating this right side of their brain, which is why I think we have a lot of delusions and fantasies and kind of a little bit of a psychosis in our world, because, you know, in this patriarchal structure, which is that left brain, we're not feeding that right brain into it. But before I get too far off the topic, so he is telling her that she is going to be his wife and the queen of the underworld. And so she's in the underworld pining for her mother. Demeter is grieved and sorrowful over her daughter's absence and neglects her care of duties. And just a reminder, she's the goddess of grain and growth. So you can only imagine what is happening to the crops. And oh, thank you. Thanks for the sub. So we're looking at Demeter just constantly pleading for the people of the physical world, because these crops are the crops are obviously not going well, because the queen of crops or grain and growth is being affected. So Demeter, who was beginning to gain knowledge of Zeus's plot with Hades, was spurred into a rage over her disappearance, the disappearance of her daughter, and went in to Zeus and demanded Persephone's return. So Zeus gave in and sent his messenger Hermes down to the underworld and to find Persephone and retrieve her. So, and this is a quick summary. So what Hermes finds in the underworld is surprising. Rather than finding Persephone sad and forlorn, he finds her embracing her role of queen of the underworld, and had become strong and striking. She was very beautiful and was just flourishing down there. So he demanded Persephone return with him to her mother, and Hades pulled her away, and to comfort her, he fed her seeds from a pomegranate and told her he would miss her, but she should also fulfill her duties to her mother, right? And because she ate those pomegranate seeds, it actually tied her down into the underworld. Now, you know, there was a rule in the Inanna story where you're not to return from the underworld. You cannot return from the underworld, and that one was a pretty pretty raw and terrifying thing to experience for Inanna, because she's sitting there on a hook, just hanging like a piece of meat on a hook in the underworld. Well, here, Persephone is kind of willingly, since she ate the pomegranate seeds, it kind of tied her down to it anchored her down into the underworld. So when Persephone does return to the physical world to greet her mother, they're overjoyed, but soon Demeter began to see that Persephone had changed. So her whole demeanor, even in the story of Inanna, when she goes into the underworld, her whole disposition changes. And so it is when we start to delve into our shadow aspects of ourselves and start to work on really embracing them and seeing for what they are. And, the whole reason why I even started this episode and the whole topic of kind of becoming death is because I realized really deeply last week that I had this kind of a horrible story, that I was telling myself that everyone that I love around me dies. So anybody I love dies. And that's a pretty tragic story. And when you hold that story, or at least when I was holding the story, I started thinking of ways of how am I going to distance myself from the people I love so that they don't die too. And that's a whole thing. And now here I am working on rewriting that story, and you guys can watch the episode from yesterday to get a little bit more detail on it. It was a very detailed story of how I rewrote that and reframed it so that it's much more, it's not as traumatizing or traumatic. So Demeter realizes that her daughter Persephone had changed and things would never be as they were before. And so they were reminded of a declaration Zeus had made long ago that in order for her to stay in the physical world, Persephone would have to remain pure and unchanged. But since she ate those pomegranate seeds, the seeds of the pomegranate, she had tasted the fruit of life and could not remain with her mother. And so Zeus proposed that Persephone remain in the physical world for 4 months, for each of the seeds that she had had. And then at the end of those 4 months, she would return to her husband in the underworld because she is now married to Hades. And she is queen. So they're reigning down in the underworld. And Persephone did so. So during the months that Persephone was away, Demeter would be sad and neglectful of nature. And that's why we have, and this is kind of the story of the seasons. So we have the changing of the seasons from winter, spring, summer, and fall. So that is kind of this really brief overview of the story of this myth. And there's a lot of people know about this story, but I do want to kind of chat about that. And today's not going to be as long as yesterday, but so we have this abduction. And then you have the maternal grief and the famine that happened from that, and the intervention, and then obviously the pomegranate law, where Hades kind of like feeds these pomegranate seeds to his wife, knowing he knew that she was going to be bound to the underworld, and so she has to remain there for part of the year. And then now we have this seasonal impact of her absence corresponding with the autumn and the winter. And then when she comes back, you have spring, and then Demeter is happy again. And so everything is starting to grow. And so you have this beautiful cycle of life that we experience. So you have this mother-daughter bond and the integration of the light and the dark within one being, and the natural cycles, which are these mirrors of our internal truths. So these two stories work together. With Inanna, there's that voluntary descent into the shadow to claim unity with it. And with that, she had to give up all of these beautiful, powerful possessions that she had, her crown, her jewels, her breastplate, her robe, every gate that she enters through to get to that underworld, she's giving up this powerful part of herself and coming into the underworld, into that throne room with this vulnerability. And so when we're looking at going through our emotions and how are we going to transform ourselves, and I read something really amazing and I thought it was so great. It's when we hold these negative or dark archetypes in our system, we have a choice of transmitting that. So let's say that you were raised and you were traumatically beaten or maybe even emotionally neglected. Those things have a tremendous impact on your life. And those will start showing up from your right hemisphere as these dark archetypes. And it's imagery, it's the fantasies, it's really holding on to these dark archetypes that cause us to kind of give I hope that people experience this and maybe become a little bit more aware of the feedback loops of the trauma that we have. So if your trauma, let's say, was emotional neglect and you learn how to manage that emotion instead of regulating that emotion, you might be transmitting that archetype instead of transmuting it. So when you're transmitting it, you're doing it from this subconscious level. You're not really aware of the things that you're doing, or maybe you see that you're doing something and you don't know the source of it. And that's where, when you start to become a little bit more emotionally aware, self aware, and conscious of that archetype playing out itself over and over and over again in your life. Let's say you're so used to emotional neglect as a child, and then a lot of the times this will show up in your intimate partnerships. So you might get with somebody who is also kind of feeding back that trauma feedback loop of emotional neglect, because that is what you're used to. And so you're going to be transmitting that, because we're all energy beings. You're going to be transmitting that story, that belief, that feedback loop, and living in that archetype until you're able to so you're transmitting it, and you're until you're able to transmute it and really kind of embrace it, see what it is, thank it for protecting you when you were unable to be conscious or aware of it. Once you're able to do that, then you'll kind of be able to come back into we can call it the physical world, like we read in the story, where, okay, now I'm in my present mind. I see it for what it is, and now here I can transmute it. So that one is a huge thing. And so with Persephone, it's involuntary. She's forced into it. There's kind of this conspiracy between Zeus, her father, and Hades, her uncle. And so she is kind of forced into revealing that her own personal inner sovereignty. And she actually, in the story, you can see that once she embraced it, she was more bountiful. She became more beautiful because of that. And so when we look at these archetypes in our life and how are we going to transmute them, you actually start to become even more beautiful. It's more enchanting, because that inner beauty, that inner world that you are, starts to be that energy is sent out. That hologram, like I was talking about, our brains kind of create this hologram of our outer world. Even though we think with our left brains that we can sit there and control it, our right brains are like, no, you can't control it, and it's not going to go away until you like look in that mirror of yourself and figure that out. And a lot of the times when you're doing the emotional intelligence work and you're working on the shadowy aspects of yourself, and really just not that you're trying to get rid of them, but just trying to understand them and then know when you're in those loops, the more that you become aware of them, the more that they surface, the more that you're able to kind of be that better version of yourself. You're more on a direction of personal mastery. And that is, a big part of my purpose of why I'm here. I find that achieving personal mastery within myself, and I hope that the people that are watching would desire that for themselves as well, is the really the only thing that I can control. It's really the only thing that I can have any say over and change, and then see that change come to fruition. And part of that, I'm not entirely certain like how that does with manifesting. I just know that from this brain level, like these brains that we have, our heart is kind of a brain, our mind is this brain, and once we really truly understand the technology, which is our brain, and the technology, which is our heart, is then we have this more control aspect of what we can become. So Inanna is stripped of every form of power that she has in order to re-emerge as her authentic self. And if you guys remember the story, she comes back. She ends up figuring out a way. She had told a few gods, "Hey, I'm going down." She had anchored in her world. "I'm going down into the underworld. If I don't return, come retrieve me. Send somebody to get me." And Enki, the god of wisdom, was the only one willing to go down and retrieve her. And she had come back, and she saw that her husband was unmoved by her absence. He was just doing his own thing. He didn't care that she was gone. He didn't care that, he wasn't like sounding the alarm. He was still dressed extravagantly. He wasn't in sackcloth and ashes and lamenting, like, where's my wife? He just didn't care. And so she was like, well, take him. He'll be my tribute. And so he and his sister were the ones that were taking turns in the underworld. And then, Inanna was able to reign as Queen of Heaven because she was her authentic self. And now with Persephone, that the fact that she was bound by those seeds, that she was reborn as the queen in these dual realms. So she's able to kind of go back and forth between the underworld and come and go back up to the physical world. So she's able to kind of go between these. She's able to be in this duality. And so too is it when we're dealing with these shadow aspects of ourselves. And it really is going into that fear, facing it, and then coming back more authentic, re-emerged as something new. And in the story that I just read, her mother notices this change that's in her. She was forever changed by going into the underworld. In the story of Inanna, the emphasis on reclaiming a voice and agency is one of the key points in that myth. These things that we're talking about are really initiations. Are you prepared to initiate yourself? Do you find that you have that confidence to go in and really look at this? I mean, when it really boils down to it, we can't run away from these dark archetypes. These dark archetypes are forever in our feedback loop. They're sitting in this right brain that it may seem obscure. So when we look at the 11th gene key, the shadowy aspect of that gene key is obscurity, meaning like even though these archetypes are playing out, these fantasies are playing out in our world, and we're thinking, oh, it's just external, like these things are just happening to me. I say that's not the case. You have so much agency, you have so much sovereignty that you're likely giving away that power and that authority to these external sources instead of really just looking in and digging down. I read a beautiful passage, and it was, I'll just kind of sum it up, that we think of ascension as going up there. We think of light as going into heaven. And it really is this aspect of going deep underground and facing whatever that fear aspect, facing death, the death of our ego, the death of what we feel is comfortable, the comfort of whatever trauma that we're living with. If we're looking at that as a punishment, like I said, if, oh, these things are just happening to me. I don't know why I always attract this man or this woman or whomever. I don't know why they're always coming into my life. Like, I just have it, it's just bad out for me. Instead of, you know, maybe there's something going on with me that this recurring feedback loop is continuing to happen, and I'm bringing in these cast of characters that are revealing, they're trying to reveal to me something within myself that I need to course correct. So it really is an initiation when you start to recognize those trends and that feedback loop that's going on in your life. To it really is, the onus is on you. The onus is on your own self leadership and self your own like desire for personal mastery. So the emphasis with Inanna was that reclaiming of that voice and that agency. And with Persephone, hers is centered on family love and the seasonal initiation. So I like to think of this. I mean, I've always been pretty seasonally minded. I live in a very seasonal climate, and a lot of the wisdom and that comes from that seasonality is important. Now, when you're going on this deep, shadowy journey into your own personal underworld, it's not always going to be like epiphany after epiphany. Sometimes it's like epiphany, 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 and then you drop down and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm really sad, and then you're crying and whatever. So it's this big roller coaster of emotions, of feelings, of experiences, of new things popping up. But the wonderful thing is, like, once you start getting used to going on that ride, you know that even in that depressed state, that express state is going to happen. So the depressed state is like really going deep inside and feeling that, and then your express state will start to pop up. So then it really is like a roller coaster of emotion, and that is a saying because it's very much true, and it is completely normal to experience those things. So these myths point to this path into the inner darkness that is sitting within each one of us. Nobody is, nobody is unable to not experience that. You're always going to have some sort of experience. And the level of it, just because somebody might be able to handle a great deal of trauma and work through a great deal of trauma, just because maybe somebody has a lighter load of it doesn't make it any easier for them. It might be a very big challenge for them to go through whatever their trauma initiation is. And so just be really gentle on yourself of if, like for me, sometimes I get very overwhelmed. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so much to work through, and I know that I'm a powerful being and that I can make it through it, but sometimes it does feel overwhelming. And so I have a lot of compassion for people that even have just one thing that they're working through, as long as they're doing the work and really connecting with themselves. I think that that journey into that fuller wholeness of their self is so important. All right. So the darkness part here in the Anana story, I'm just kind of doing a little back and forth here, is that she had the 3 days of void. So like I said, she's hanging from this hook like a piece of rotting meat. And with the Persephone story, it's a little lighter. It's the famine in the crops. It's not having. It's like going through winter, It's that darkness of winter that you're constantly having to experience. So when we look at the seasonality and the cycle of it, just know that when you overcome one thing, like be really joyful and grateful that that story is now cleared, and now you can kind of work on to the go on to the next season, whatever that one might look like. So a large part of the seasonal metaphor here is that you're going to go into retreat, which means you're going to go down. You're really going to be kind of looking at this darkness and really feeling the starvation of that beautiful light that comes in spring and summer and that fun, really light, airy vibe. And then when you get into winter, you'll experience the the retreat and then the resurgence. So you have this beautiful seasonality of your own shadowy journey within. Okay, did I get all my stuff? I had so many notes. So sorry, you guys. Okay. Um, yeah, so one of the things that I noticed and I kind of want to bring up is every time I have these big shifts, and what I mean big shift is when I have this really deep awareness of this is the story that I'm going through. So the most recent one that I was going through this last week was everyone I love dies. And it was because in my family, somebody got into a severe car accident. They're in ICU, and we were supposed to be camping that weekend, and instead here I am camping out in the hospital in the ICU unit, where my family member couldn't even talk to me, and we were having so many good conversations at the time, and then it's just this repeating story. Like I said, it's the feedback loop of last year I lost my mother, a couple years before that I lost my grandpa. When I was 25, I lost my father. When I was 6, I lost my grandmother. And so, like, there's these feedback loops that I was experiencing in this really deep level. And because of the exhaustion that I was feeling. So, I felt exhaustion. And every time I feel exhaustion, I know that one, I'm crying. Like, that's just going to happen. Like, there's the floodgates are going to open. But then, two, there's a deeper story there. There's a deeper something going on of why am I crying? And really diving deeply into the full picture. And so the reality of everyone I love dies felt real. It felt like it was a reality. But I actually am not the Grim Reaper. I'm not the one that's choosing who does and who does not die. Hi, Mike. So the awareness of me seeing that pattern of energetic initiation of losing these family members, and that feeling of loneliness and the powerlessness that comes also with that feeling of responsibility, recognizing that I'm not responsible for their lives. I'm only responsible for my own and how I manage through that pain. So, this is a huge pattern of energetic initiation. And when I see things like this, so big shifts for me being this, it's really, it really is an initiation. It means that when I become aware of something, now I have the agency to do something about it. Now I can see that story for what it is and really peel back the layers of why do I process it like that? Is there a different way that I can process it now? And am I going to be stuck in the underworld? Am I going to be stuck with that story that's weighing my being down and preventing me from being a bigger energy? Or can I have my own resurgence of that? Can I peel back the layers and see the mystical story that's being played out here. So every time I have experienced this and I overcome it, it's, how would I describe this? It's a beautiful thing. I don't think my words will give it justice. But every time that I am able to peel back these deep traumatic stories and reveal a new story, like reframe it where I'm not the owner of it. Like I don't own these other, I don't own their lives. I know that I'm connected to them, but I don't own them. Every time that I'm able to like release that and let it go and accept it for what it is, then big, beautiful things happen. It's a new energy comes in. So you're opening it, when you open your energy up, a lot of people think that they have to like continue to collect, and that's how you get stuff, and you just like keep on running after things to get it. But really, the beauty is coming from letting it go and surrendering the control that you think you have over it, and saying, I don't have control over that situation. I don't have control over whether somebody lives or dies. For the most part, unless you're like the power of attorney for somebody that's, a vegetable or anything like that. Maybe you have a little bit more say over it. But for the most part, every day, people, they don't really have say over who the Grim Reaper is going to be coming and taking, right? That's a whole nother mythos. And I am not the Grim Reaper. I am love embodied. And that is my goal, is to have a personal mastery where I am love embodied. So when you are approaching this and you're letting go and you're opening yourself up to this new chapter and expansion of yourself and this new power that you have, it's it's this test that your system, your central nervous system, is testing you on how are you going to react. If I'm sitting here saying, I want to have a huge successful business where I'm impacting everybody and I'm revealing to them, I'm teaching them how amazing our bodies are, how amazing the technology that our bodies are, and the things that we're capable of are far beyond our imaginations. Like, they're far beyond anything that a cinematic representation can do. So any movies that you see, anything like that, we can expand way beyond that. So this is a test of, are you ready to handle this next big thing that you've been asking for? So if I'm asking, for to be a keynote speaker and to have big impact on people's lives, the response that my nervous system is saying is, can you handle that? Let's see how you handle this situation. Let's see how you handle that situation. Can you pass the test? Are you going to eat the pomegranates? Are you going to make the deals? So when we're looking at this threshold trauma that's like sitting there, like, are you going to pass the test? It's not there to punish you. It's there to say, can you move through this moment? Can you move forward through it even though it hurts? And how are you going to do that? Can you alchemize the grief that you're feeling into fuel and not fear? Can you remove that fear and use that as fuel to keep guiding you into the next part of whatever the thing that your desire is? Because we all have dreams and desires. And if you don't have dreams and desires, I think you have some knowledge on a really deep level. Maybe it's subconscious of where you want to go in your life. And a big part of why I'm here is to help people find their purpose. I can say that last year I was a little like blind, like like I said, that obscurity of what is my, I didn't even name my business yet. I mean, I had some ideas, but I never named my business. And I got really serious about it. And I said, I'm going to name it Soulestic Intelligence. Because on a soul level, my physical being, my mental being, my emotional being, my soul being, all of those things hold intelligence. And that is what I want my business to be, is to be this beautiful soul-led business. It's also asking, can you shed your old identity fully, or are you going to cling on to what is dying? And I am the queen of clinging on. It's that control that I want. I want my life to look this certain way. I want my job to be this certain thing. I want people to view me in this certain identity. And sometimes you have to let go of the old identities in order to claim a new one. So these trauma thresholds, we can look at them as these gatekeeping entities. They're gatekeeping us from going into that next level. And earlier in the broadcast today, I was talking about how, the left side of the brain is very much patriarchal. So if we look at history, we can see all this patriarchal energy. The way that we treat women, that's a demonstration of this heavy patriarchal energy. And I'm not talking about patriarchal as in men are bad or anything like that. I don't think that they are. In fact, I love men and I want them to be the best representation of men as possible. But the truth of the matter is our histories have shown us that the way that we treat the feminine is not necessarily nice. And even now there's a little bit of this inversion of the feminine and the masculine. So right now what we're looking at, 2012, what was it called? There was a term. I don't know if you guys know it, but there was definitely a term for 2012. Let me grab it really quick. It was known as the melodic renaissance or resonance. So 2012, if you're looking at the past cultures that we've had in life, like one of the things I think about is the Mayan calendar. It was like it went up to 2012. And then like people are like, oh my gosh, 2012 is coming around, 2012 is coming around. And then nothing happened, right? There wasn't anything that happened. You have to leave it to God. Yeah, partly, but we are also made in the image of God. We can't just be laying about, like there's a lot of things that we do want to leave to God, especially like when it comes to somebody living or dying. So I agree with you there. But we're also made in the image of God. So when these traumas come up and they show up in our minds, we're really looking at this dark feminine energy of our right minds, which is really connected to creativity. It's connected to fantasy. It's connected to imagery. And so, we've got this side of our brain that we're really trying to kind of marry together so that our energies are in this harmonic balance. And that's a big reason why I'm here, is to teach about the harmony of the energies. And just to kind of help move that along. Bring it to the consciousness. Bring it to the people that are watching this. If you're being activated by the things that I'm saying, and you're like, oh my gosh, like that is, maybe you've been thinking about it and you just didn't have ways to say it. It's really funny. I was having, her name is Casey Marriott. I had an interview with her on my podcast, and we were chatting, and she's like, you're a 2-line, and I know that every 2-line has something that they're thinking about that they're not sharing with the world. So you need to be bold and share whatever it is that you've been working on. And so here I am. And that's why I say, like, I hope that it's activating for you and that it is bringing to awareness some really important pieces of how am I going to transmute this shadow aspect? Because you're going to transmute it, you're going to transmit it. Like I said, we are these beautiful beacons of energy. We've got this nice torus field of energy just swirling around us. And it's so powerful. It's actually creating this world around us that we see. Some people might, it's kind of new. I mean, epigenetics was a huge thing, and then it kind of died away a little bit, but epigenetics was a huge thing in 2014. I remember learning about it in 2014 and being really fascinated by it. So when I am coming up with this story of everyone I love dies, obviously there's a lot of familial relationships that are involved in that. And this is looking at these intergenerational contracts. So, as I'm really looking at this family member, I'm also thinking about my mother and then their relationship, and then hearing these stories about the family and the things that they went to, and then realizing like how much they protected me from that previous family trauma. But that trauma is still existing to some degree in my nervous system. And so when these archetypes come up, a lot of the time they may not even be my traumas. They might be intergenerational traumas, which is an epigenetic form of it kind of surfacing within myself. And so once you see it from this intergenerational space, then you can start to transmute that, which is an even more powerful thing, because then now you're cleaning up your DNA. You're cleaning up that genetic material that might have a little bit of gunk on it, and you're cleaning it up. And once you learn how to do that, it does get easier and easier. But I think the first step is always the hardest part. So when your energy, or even my energy, when it starts to ascend, which means I'm going deeper into my own inner self, ascension, we think of it as going up, but it really is just going down, cleaning the things up. And then when we come back emerging, we're like Persephone, and she's just glowing, and she's different, and it's noticeably different. And Nana is the same. She goes into the underworld, and when she emerges as the Queen of Heaven. And so these mythical archetypes, these stories, are telling us these deep mystical truths about ourselves, our bodies. So when your energy ascends emotionally, financially, spiritually, unresolved family karma can surge up, and it can be cleared through you. Like I said, this was a moment where I knew it wasn't my karmic load, it was my intergenerational karmic load. There's this generational curse that's sitting in my system that needs to be cleaned, because they were unable to clean it. They were unable to face it. And now that I see it, I know how powerful I am. I know I can alchemize it. So here I am alchemizing it. It may require some ugly crying. It may require sleepless nights. It may require noticing how out of sync my nervous system is. And because I am so aware of my being, because I'm so mindful and present in who I am, I'm able to recognize it for what it is, name it, and thank it. Be really grateful that my system is like, here's the thing, can you take care of it? And for me, I'm like a yes person. Like, I'll do all the people pleasing. And now I've can stop doing the people pleasing and do the generational cleanup. So the past rises when the soul is ready to eclipse it. The past is going to rise. Those generational traumas might rise. Your own personal feedback loops might rise, and you might see it. and when your soul is ready to eclipse it, meaning things are not going to come into your path until you're able to really truly face it. So when you're seeing these repetitions, when you're seeing this trauma pop up in your system, and you know it's in your system because your body will start to, if you're in tune with your body, you're going to feel it. So the events that happen from this debt surfacing, the karmic debt, it may not be yours, but it's in your family. It's for you to witness it and for you to transmute it. You don't have to continue transmitting it. Okay. The next reason why these things pop up is there is a certain level of initiation through the chaos. There was initiation for Inanna to go through the 7 gates into the underworld. There was an initiation, and she willfully did it. She knew that she was doing it. She knew that she was going to have to get rid of her power, her perceived power, and let that go and be vulnerable in that chaos. And it was chaotic. The Anuna down there were like cursing her and anger. There was anger and guilt that were being cast on her. And then she's, sitting on that hook for 3 days, 3 nights. And then with the same thing with Persephone, it was probably a little bit sad for her to be, torn from her mother. She was having a good time picking flowers with her friends. She didn't know. She was innocent. And then all of a sudden there's this earthquake, and then she's swallowed up into the underworld and basically forced to be, there was, I guess it was kind of a arranged marriage, but it was a pretty traumatic experience, I'm sure. But that chaos that she went through was chaos enough for her to embrace being in the underworld. So she learned a lot while she was under there. And she became more beautiful for it. So initiates often pass through ordeals during major energetic upgrades. I know that my experience last week, I logically knew this is an upgrade. I logically knew that I don't own this. I'm not in control. Even though, I'm the voice speaking for somebody who can't speak for themselves, I know that if I pulled myself back from, the feelings that I have in it, and I look at it from a macro level, I know that this is just an energetic initiation. This is a upgrade of my energy. So ancient people knew this, and they knew that the descent, from the stories of Inanna or Persephone, or there's other stories out there, they knew that this initiation is an upgrade. Some shamans call it a wounding rite, R-I-T-E, where something dies so something deeper may awaken. So this story, I was able to look at it, reframe it, and now I'm thanking it, and now it's gone. I don't own that. A couple weeks ago, I'm going through some major upgrades, you guys. A couple weeks ago, I'm triggered to none. I'm just crying from pain, from this fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of powerlessness. Just all these fears are surfacing. And I knew I was going through an upgrade, but in the moment, I felt like I was dying. I felt like my insides were churning out. I couldn't stop crying. There was nobody I could call to get rid of it. So I'm sitting there and I'm crying, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm going to die. And do I just push everybody away so that I could just die in peace, just lay on my bed in the fetal position and just waste away and wither? And an amazing thing happened. I had this vision of my own inner king. I've been doing all this inner king work. I had a vision of my inner king. It was a vision. Remember, it's the right brain vision. He was animated, an animated version of my king. And he had his, He's jolly looking, gray hair, kind of messy, has a crown on, has the robes on, very cartoonish. And so as I'm sitting there in this like dying state, he yells, "Enough." And as soon as I heard him say enough, it all went away. Enough. Enough being enough. You don't have that, you don't own that. Those wounds are not your wounds. Those are your generational wounds just kind of popping up. Those are your wounds they're not your wounds. They belong to somebody else. Those wounds did have an impact on you, but they're not yours to carry. Okay? So enough was let them go. Let the baggage go. Let the fear go. You're enough. So enough of holding that story. And that was a huge major energetic upgrade. It made me it brought to consciousness that I need to be very careful of how I label myself. I'm going to label myself as the one that's holding these fears, holding the abandonment. That is me. I have an abandonment issue. I have a father wound. I have attachment issues. Am I going to label myself that way? Am I really truly that person that I envision when I have a vision of myself? Am I that person? No. So enough was cut it. So you take your big sword and you cut those bonds that you have with those wounds because they're not yours. So that was a huge initiation. So over the past couple of weeks, I've had these really giant initiations of cutting these things out, of cleaning up the DNA, of addressing the generational curses and working through those and rewriting that, reframing it. So now anytime I'm present and somebody has that wound in my family or even in the collective, like I'm doing this on the collective side too. Hello. I'm doing this on the collective side too, which is why this is being broadcast. So we're going through wounding rites. So where something dies, something deeper may awaken. I'm doing well. How are you? So you may be moving in the underworld. You may be in the underworld right now. But it's not because you're lost. If you found yourself there and you didn't realize that you were there, it might be the story of Persephone, where you were just engulfed and then taken down into the underworld. Okay? That's one way to get there. The other one is like Inanna, she willingly goes down in there. So there's these two different scenarios, these two different myths, and there's likely other myths, but there's these two myths that we're working on today of going deep into your own underworld, facing with vulnerability some of these wounds, traumas, attachments, whatever it is that you need to initiate through. This is not because you're lost, but because you're reclaiming power buried there. So in both of these stories, the goddess ends up becoming the ruler. They end up becoming more powerful in the end. Okay, so it seems scary. The initial initiation is like the most terrifying because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you're going to come back from it. And that's terrifying. Like, I don't want to walk into a deep cave unless it's like, a system that people have been through before. If I'm going into the Oregon bat caves, I know that there's a system that is going to protect me to a certain extent. But if you're going into this unknown cave, I see all these like spelunkers. That's what they're called, spelunkers. And they're going into these caves and they're like wiggling their bodies, like grown men, wiggling their bodies through these these cave systems, not knowing like what's on the other side. Like that's how it will feel when you're initially initiated into some of these things. And there may be even some seasoned people out there that are able to dive deep into their own personal underworlds. And there may be some experiences that come up that might be still terrifying to them, even though they're very experienced with doing it. Just depends on the levels of what you're working with. So we're reclaiming power buried there. Okay, and then finally, the last piece that I want to talk about is the energetic expansion that happens, or this shadow emergence. So we were talking about the cyclical seasonality of Persephone going into the underworld, then coming up, going into the underworld and coming up, and how that is kind of this story of why we have seasons. So you have this energetic expansion once you complete that initiation of the shadow emergence. So light attracts darkness, and it's not always malevolent, but the unhealed, unfaced parts of you and others. So it's not always malevolent. It's the unhealed, unfaced parts of you and others. And that's what the shadow really, truly is. So your evolution, once you evolve out of that and you experience that energetic expansion, then you start to activate others and their collapses. It might activate, like my expansion might activate somebody else's collapse. They might become, what I guess the main term that people use now is they might become triggered by just being in my presence, because now I'm at this higher resonance. My energy is more expanded, and this can be true for you too. So you becoming free can trigger collapse in systems, or so systems or people who were energetically tied to your old role or your old identity. What does that mean? What that means, and this can be, it doesn't have to be people, it could be jobs, it could be a system that you're part of, it could be a friend group. Once you start to expand your energy and you start to deal with these shadow aspects of yourself and start alchemizing them into this light aspect of yourself, you're thanking it for being there for you, for carrying you through a difficult time. But now I don't need you anymore. I'm able and capable to take care of myself. Then you'll start to attract different people, and then other people will start to resonate away. They don't want to be around your energy because now they're going to have to go into the underworld, and it's scary, like I said. So if you think about this as like a dam, and that it's holding this emotional, you have this dam and it's holding the water, and the water is like all your emotions. And you imagine, okay, now I'm going to let it go. And it starts flooding everything. Now, some people might not know how to swim. Some people might not know how to even label their feelings, which is true for a huge part of the populace. I am always telling people to get an emotions wheel. They're online. You could just type in emotions wheel into your search bar, and you'll get tons of images that pop up. People have done a lot of work on putting emotions wheels together. There's also emotions charts, where it's just kind of like the emotions are labeled in these little, like a table. I like the wheel because I like colors and looking at the beautiful imagery. And it starts with like a simple description of the emotion. So it could be anger, disgust, joy, whatever the main thing is. And then it'll start, oh, well, if it's this, then it might be irritated. If it's this, it might go even deeper. when I spend time looking at an emotions wheel, and I'll do it periodically just to look at it, and I'll see, oh, okay, I've identified with that feeling, then I can say, oh, wow, I'm holding a lot of anger. So the emotions wheel is really nice to help identify some of the feelings that you're feeling. And you might be flooding and you might not even know it. You might be just lightly treading water, or even worse, like being taken under. So the energetic expansion, that shadow emergence of who you are, once you start to look at these emotions, once you start facing these shadow aspects of yourself, you'll start to see collapses happen around you. A lot of the time, if you're in a job that is kind of holding you down, you'll know. I was thinking about this today because, a big part of what I do in my series is I talk about digital technology and how it affects us emotionally. And we may not even know that we're just like completely plugged into the digital technology and not plugging into ourselves. And I was like, there's been so many times where I've identified myself in certain roles as like a robot. If you work in a big corporation, you might just be you might feel like you're just a number. And that is so disempowering. It doesn't feel good to be kind of in that spectrum. And that is why you need emotional intelligence. That is going to help break you out of that robotic matrix that is so cold and dark, because we want to break out of the darkness. It's not really dark. I don't want to call it dark. We want to break out of that logistical, it's just cold is really what it is. This logistical, analytical, make money, make numbers, KPIs, all that kind of stuff. You want to kind of break out of that. If you're constantly in that, if you're just plugged into that side, you will feel like a robot. You will feel like just a number when you're going to work. So once you start to like really deep dive into those dark archetypes on the right brain side, then you'll start to have harmony. But you might have some collapses. You might say, I've been doing this job for 6 years, and now I'm so dissatisfied. I feel like a number. I feel like a robot. And then in order to combat that, I'm going to take an emotional intelligence course, or I'm going to have a coach like walk me through how am I going to restore my identity? How am I going to really reconnect with myself? So I'm going to hire this coach. You hire the coach, you do the work, and then all of a sudden you have this huge expansion. You're dealing with all this shadow aspect of yourself, and then you're looking at your job and you're like, I don't even know if I could do this anymore. Like literally physically, I don't think I could do this anymore. I can't even get myself out of bed and go to work. I need to change that part. That system is collapsing. So you'll experience changes. Maybe you don't want to live in the same city or town or wherever you're living. Your living situation is now, you've recognized, I've been chasing this lifestyle that I've built around myself out of necessity and not out of my own living being of what I want and my presence here and my purpose. It's not fulfilling me. Collapse. You might find yourself in a relationship where you're not connecting with the partner that you initially had connected with. Maybe that partner is feeding a trauma loop that you've had, and then they're not willing to grow out of that with you. And so you kind of grow away. It's a collapse. So collapses do happen, And so just be aware of that. Be really open about where you're going. It's being very transparent and vulnerable and really true to who you are. Because really, like, you are here for you. You're not here to, like, control other people's lives. You're here to control your own. And you have the most control over your own self. So just remember that this is the descent into the descent into the underworld is a initiation, and once that's done, you become a catalyst, and then you might see things start to collapse around you. So, if you are going through this or you're planning on going through this, you're just remember you're not being punished, you're being initiated. Okay? You're not causing chaos, you're breaking cycles that need to be broken. Like, people need to be out here doing this work for the collective. And it only can happen if you start doing it yourself. So you are walking through the underworld and you're bringing the light back up from it. So every in these stories, she comes out of the underworld improved, and it's not just only women can experience going into the underworld. Not true. It's men and women. Women may typically be really aware that they need to be doing this, but men have very great insight on the things that are going around and the things that are happening within themselves too. So I don't give them a pass. The men need to be doing the work as well. Okay? Whew. All right. That was a couple hours of deep insights. It was a couple hours of some activating discussions. I didn't even get into the Gene Key 11, but I do encourage you guys to look at that. Just briefly, I will talk about it. It's known as the Light of Eden. And this one is a beautiful one that I was reading about today. The shadow is obscurity, which is, if you think of obscurity, it's really like fogginess. It's low vision. It's, the light is kind of dimmed. The gift is idealism, and it's not the opposite of realism. Idealism is that fantasy or the delusion world that you can live in. But it's a little bit more beautiful when you get into that gift part of it. And then the city is light. And it's not the light that our eyes do, like the focal points. We're looking at the light as this beautiful divine state. It's not physical. It's just a clear, pure light. And then, in the Bible, Jesus does talk about, you're the light of the world. So just remember that you are the light of the world, and we're all able to access this light. It does take diving deep into our shadow aspects, cleaning it up in order to start seeing that, because that will start to activate this right brain, the right hemisphere of our brain. It'll start to activate that, and you'll start to see more visions, more images, and it can be a little jarring if you're not used to it, but it is also a beautiful thing. You might have even more intense dreams, and so I encourage you to kind of play around with that. Try to have somebody that will anchor you. Really just have a friend, have a coach, have a mentor, a therapist, whomever, somebody that you can go to and help bring you back from the depths that you go into, because sometimes some people can get stuck in them and then become frozen in it. So the survival, like I said, that central nervous system that you're experiencing things in is very powerful. So if you tend to freeze in stuff, you might freeze in that experience that you're having if you don't have somebody to kind of like bring you back to, okay, come back for air. I always look at it as going down into this deep murky water. Are you able to have somebody, if you pull on a string, like help pull you up so that you don't just drown in it? Okay? Awesome. Well, it's 11:01 here, and I am going to go rest. It has been my pleasure to deliver this message to you today. This is the Soulestic Intelligence Podcast, and I am your host, Amelie, and I have had such a pleasure in delivering this message because it's been so activating for me. Like I said, I'm going through some really big upgrades this past couple weeks, and I'm very thrilled. And I hope that this has activated some part of your system to start doing some of this work as well, because it takes the collective to really start making change. Like, we are the catalysts of change, and it's not marching in a street. It's really going deep inside of ourselves, cleaning it up, and then being the change. Okay? All right. I love you guys. Thank you so much for joining me. I do have a podcast that I'm doing tomorrow. I don't know when it'll air, but once it airs, I'll get a copy of it and I'll post it here in my channel. So if you're watching this and you have not done so already, please subscribe. Please like the video if you liked the content. And if there's any information that you want to add, please comment as well. It really helps me to curate the best messages going forward. As a 6-2 reflector in human design, it really helps me to hear what the people are saying, the feedback. I love words, and I really enjoy the conversation that people have. And so thank you if you have been commenting, and if you have not, if you can give, just a little bit of what your feedback is, I would appreciate that as well. So I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. Take care, and I will see you later. Good night.